Okay, hello everyone. Welcome along to another episode, exciting episode, I'm sure, of In Conservation with. I'm just for those people who are new to the procedure, which I don't think that there's that many, but if there are, please remain silent, of course. And if you have any questions, let us know in terms of anything that Keith talks about that sparks an interest in you. Please let us know, and we will answer those questions at the end. So basically, the long and short of it's this: it's a 60-minute conversation between myself and my good friend Keith, and then at the end of that 60 minutes, I will ask him something quite. I might ask. In fact, I'm asking you a question, and I'll basically say goodbye to you, but don't actually go anywhere because we're not going anywhere. It's just that that particular 60-minute part is the bit that goes on to the YouTube channel, the Urban Birder, and then straight afterwards we're going to have a Q&A, which will then leave us with the end of the story, really. So that is the uh, the idea behind what we're doing today. So I hope that works with everyone. It's also going to be recorded live on Facebook. So I'm getting better at this. Mind you, they always seem to change the way that the whole thing is put together.
It's
It's
meant
all,
for young people, David,
yeah, they're just people.
not people like us.
Yeah, they keep on changing
I know.
all the buttons you press and stuff. It just becomes so confusing. So when we go live, I will be able to. But we're going to just go ahead anyway. So let me just. You can see me now, can you?
Yeah, I can see you looking
Okay.
good.
I can't see you, but anyway, doesn't matter. All right, hello, welcome along. This is In Conservation with. My name is David Lindo, also known as the Urban Birder, and I hope everyone's well out there. By the way, for those new to In Conservation with, it is a series of live interviews on Zoom with some of the movers and shakers within the world of conservation. And you can find a whole stack of them in our Urban Birder YouTube channel. I think there's over 200 interviews, maybe 220, something like that. And one of the interviews is actually with my guest who's here with me today, Keith Betton. And I believe that Keith was here maybe towards the end of the pandemic talking about public speaking, which is, I think, is a very important question, subject, should I say, which you can investigate further if you go online and basically look for it on the In Conservation with channel. But anyway, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Keith Betton for those who don't know him. But before I do, I must say a big thank you for the sponsors of In Conservation with, and they are Koa, who are the manufacturer of the world renowned Promenade Scope series, fantastic scopes, and also Birds, Wildlife and Nature, the tour company who offer or actually strive to deliver the best birding and wildlife opportunities in terms of watching the wildlife throughout the world. So thank you very much, guys, for the sponsorship. So without any further ado, please welcome along Keith Betton. Hello, Keith, and how are
Hello,
you?
David. It's
How
good
are
to be
you?
here again.
Great. I'm glad you're here as well. How are you, and where are you?
I am fine, and I am in Farnham in Surrey, which is where I live in the United Kingdom. Recently returned from some foreign travels in South America, Central America, but we'll be traveling more over the next few months, but actually not this year to Africa, but I do love Africa and That's where I've probably been to more than any other continent in the world.
We've known each other. I mean, I say this a lot actually when I think about our knowledge of each other, but we've known each other for a heck of a long time. I can't even put a number on it in terms of years.
35 or so, I'd say.
Oh, you knew me when I was 6.
Uh, you're doing well. No, I actually remember you when I had dark hair and you had hair. So, that's a pretty good record, isn't it?
It is indeed.
Sorry
So,
about
talking about Keith's history, I'll just quickly recap it. I mean, it's quite a long history here, so forgive me for looking at my notes, but I don't want to get anything wrong, of course. But you've spent your career in public relations, mostly in the travel industry, and you were regularly on TV and on radio talking about holiday issues for the trade body, otherwise known as ABTA. And after 20 years, you made more than 1,000 TV appearances, becoming a regular travel expert on This Morning, better known then as the Richard and Judy Show. You always seem to be, I remember you showing pictures of yourself, maybe on Facebook and perhaps in one of your talks, where you were supposedly around about 16 or something, but you looked as if you were 35. And I think you've kind of been 35 for about 40 years. And then, is that, am I sort of, do you think that's a good way of describing how you came across in those early days?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so you're talking about a photo that was taken of me when I was filming for Blue Peter in 1977. I was 16 years old and I did a piece with John Noakes about the birds in one of the London Royal Parks, Bushy Park. So yeah, I was quite mature for my age. I was a birder from the age of 8. I got bullied a fair bit as a kid for being a birder, and I think it sort of toughened me up, made me quite mature. My father was a bank manager, so quite often I ended up getting taken to dinners and things with all his customers and business friends. And so I was much better at talking to people of my parents' age than my age. So I kind of looked older than I was, behaved older than I was. Bit of a drawback at school, I have to say. Don't recommend that. But actually, when you start working and looking for jobs, it's a good thing because people take you seriously. And the job in the travel industry sent me around the world. Very fortunate to have been to 123 countries. And of the 59 or so countries in Africa, I've been to 34 of them. So I've been very lucky traveling the world with somebody else paying for it mostly.
Yeah, well, that's a good thing to do. You've worn many hats. In fact, you still wear quite a few hats. You've been involved with the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds. Um, you've been also involved with the British Trust for Ornithology, and you were the president of the London Natural History Society at the tender age of 22.
Right.
Even though you may have looked 35, they might have thought you were a lot older person than what you actually were. And you are currently the chair of the Hampshire Ornithological Society, for whom I've given a talk at your kind invitation. And now, well, in recent years, you've been on the councils of both the RSPB and the RSPB and the BTO. So, you are. I mean, I also think of you, when I think of you, I think of you as a person championing not only birding in Hampshire, but also peregrines. So, as far as I'm concerned, if I was in control and in charge, you'd be given a knighthood probably about 15 years ago at least.
Thank you. Well, I was really lucky to get involved in peregrines back 15 years ago. I started studying them. I realized that nobody in Hampshire was really keeping a proper eye on them. And we now have between 20 and 25 pairs of peregrines. It's been quite an exciting few days. We've got a pair at Romsey Abbey, and we actually had the male from that pair very sadly get killed. He was carrying a drake teal that he'd obviously caught in the morning on Thursday. He sadly dropped it on a roadway, tried to retrieve it, got killed, and already he's been replaced. A new male has taken up with his female. And just to add to the mix, his son from last year is still around, and was also having a bit of a bid to become the new male, but he's too young. He's got to wait another year for that. So a lot of drama in peregrines always. But yeah, so I've been involved with lots of other organizations. I'm involved in BirdLife International. I do all their media training around the world. So I train staff both in the UK and all around the world on Zoom, just trying to help them to speak more clearly, understand sometimes how to answer questions more clearly. People don't necessarily give clear answers. Scientists always take great comfort in detail. You don't want detail if you're asking a simple question. You want a simple answer. Um, and I'm involved in other organizations too, including the African Bird Club, which I used to be chair of. I then became vice president. And then there was a vacancy for chair, and I was asked if I'd come back and do a second term. And I've just started that now. And I'm really pleased. It's a great organization. And I know we're going to talk about it a bit this evening.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's just get straight into it. What drew you to Africa? Why Africa? Because I know you also were involved, for example, with the
Osmi.
OSME.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Africa
So
was the
before
first.
you actually explain, let me just tell people what OSME is, the Ornithological Society of the Middle East. So just so you know what OSME means. Sorry.
Absolutely. So there are four World Bird Clubs, and OSME and ABC are two of those. I basically did my first ever big trip, my first independent trip, to Kenya in 1983. I was 23 years old. I planned it by talking to lots of friends who'd been, got a map, talked to a travel agent who pre-booked me some hotels. Probably sent faxes to do that. Does anybody send faxes these days? And I got out there. I had 3 weeks traveling around on my own, and I absolutely loved it. I had a field guide with illustrations, half of which were in black and white. And as a result, I only saw about 200 species because I didn't know what I was looking at. But, you know, I love the sound of Africa. I love the smell of Africa. There's a particular smell that's quite distinctive. And it's just that just sticks with me as my first big independent trip. So I've been back to Kenya since. I went back 20 years later, saw nearly 800 species on that trip, of course, with a professional guide. And since then, I've just made my way around Africa. The bits I haven't been to generally, unfortunately, are a bit unsafe in places like the Congo, where there are, continued struggles with militia, and obviously places like Sudan. I'd love to go to places like Djibouti and Somalia, but that is also off limits at the moment, really, for most people. Um, but I just love it. But I go everywhere, so I love everywhere, and wherever I am is my favorite place at that time. But Africa, if you said to me, "We can give you a free ticket, where would you go?" I'd probably go to Africa before almost anywhere else.
It's interesting. I mean, before I sort of talk about the fact that I'm of African descent myself, obviously, because I'm a black guy based in Britain or from born in Britain. What is it about Africa? Because people, I think, often think. I mean, they still think of I get the impression people still think of Africa as a colonial sort of idea, which is like deepest, darkest Africa. They think of Africa as just a total jungle. Um, you know, what is it about Africa? I know you said the smells and stuff, but
Hmm.
why not Asia? Why not South Africa, South America?
Well, I think it's actually, if I had gone to Asia first, probably I'd be more keen on Asia than anywhere else. And if I'd gone to South America, maybe the same. It's just that Africa is where I kind of really cut my foreign birding teeth. The other thing is that an awful lot of the birds that go to Africa, you see in Africa, are either species that are found in the UK and Europe because they spend their breeding seasons there and they go there in the winter, or they are very closely related to those. So, you see a warbler in Africa, you know it's a warbler. If you go to South America or Asia, something that looks like a warbler may not be a warbler, maybe something completely different, maybe a family you've never even heard of. So, being a bit selfish, I've got a better chance of identifying any bird I see in Africa because it'll be something a bit similar to what I've seen. The other thing is there are lots of great nature reserves, game parks, national parks in almost all the countries in Africa. And thank goodness, because, they are protecting these places for tourists. And if there weren't tourists, those places would very soon be cut down or become farms. Um, and mostly it's a fairly easy continent to get around. There are one or two countries where you want to be a bit careful. For example, South Africa you can go to, you can be safe, but there are places in South Africa where you can go and you will not be safe. So it's about getting the right advice, maybe picking a tour to go on rather than doing it yourself. And well, just wonderful birds.
You know, what you've got a small presentation. I think maybe this could be the point where we bring that into play because it'd be nice to just give viewers a chance to really imagine what you're talking about. So let me see if I can. This all worked well when I did it in the rehearsal. How's
There we
that look?
go. Looks good.
Oh, cool.
So shall I just talk through these? I mean, this is a so okay, there are a few trees, but this is a massive plain. This is the Ngorongoro crater. It's part of the Great Rift Valley that travels all the way down through the eastern side of Africa, starting sort of in Israel and Jordan. And it is so wonderful to look at. I mean, it's something like 20 kilometers across that Rift Valley at that point. Flamingos, just loads of birds. So that's Ngorongoro crater in Tanzania. If you go to the next slide, goodness me, slide, that's a good old name, isn't it? Here's another photo from Tanzania. So here we are in a typical sort of African acacia tree, open plains, quite a lot of game there, plenty of birds as well. And in the distance, you've got mountains and you've got forest and so on. So that's also in Tanzania. And if you just quickly whiz across to the next photo, in the Rift Valley itself, my first trip to Kenya, I went here. So Lake Nakuru. So that's just up north of Nairobi, going up the Rift Valley in Kenya. And here are, I guess, 500,000 lesser flamingos. Just a spectacle that is hard to imagine until you get there. And not only have you got adults, you've got a few young ones there. So, this is the kind of stuff where that is what Africa is really like. So people who talk about it being jungle, well, they haven't been there. It is mainly open space. Of course, there are huge jungles in places like the Congo and West Africa, amazing forest, and thank goodness because we need those forests. But most of East Africa is open, and ditto South Africa as well. So the next slide, David, I just thought I'd go through a few of my favorite birds. And here's the shoebill. It's a stork from Africa. It's only found in Africa. And this is a bird that if you ask people what bird you really want to see in Africa more than any other, this is it. So this is a shoebill chick in the nest. I took this photograph in Zambia. I was with one of the rangers in the Benguelu swamps, and he said to me, "Would you like to go and see a shoebill nest?" And I said, "Well, I'd love to," thinking it was just going to be a 5 minute walk somewhere to go and see the nest. He said, "No, no." He said, "You've got to basically put some boots on, and you're going to be wading up to your waist in a lake with a papyrus swamp." So for half an hour, I did that and eventually got to the shoebill nest, which he had to check because he wanted to make sure that the chick was okay. There'd been some fishermen nearby and he wasn't sure if they'd disturbed it. And there's the chick, a lovely chick that's 2 months old already. It's got another month or so to go before it leaves the nest. And the parents weren't far away and they come along and give it water by scooping up water in their huge beak and then dribbling it into the beak. So if you want to see this bird, probably the easiest place in the world is Uganda. There are a number of places where you can see them there, and also boat trips where they take you. And the birds see you so often, but they see birders so often, they are now quite happy about that. So the next slide, and by the way, that's vulnerable species, VU for vulnerable. Next slide is even more endangered. This is an endangered net bird now. Yet when I first saw it in 1983, it was common. This is the secretary bird, named from the feathers on the back of the head, which are said to resemble the quill pen used by secretaries perhaps back in Victorian times. It's a raptor. It's able to stamp on snakes and kill them, and that's what they feed on. It's a really impressive looking bird. You don't see it fly very often. It's mainly walking sedately around the plains. Next one.
Right. That after all that, oh, there you go. Is that it?
There we go. Common ostrich. So not a rare bird. but a record holder for so many things. Largest bird in the world, tallest bird, heaviest bird, lays the biggest egg, has the biggest eye of any bird in the world, and finally, the fastest bird in the world in terms of running, because it can run flat out way faster than you or me. So, again, I just think a super bird and one that I've loved seeing. You never tire of seeing an ostrich, and this is a male. His neck can get really fat when he wants to display to the females, looking really great. Next slide. Pied kingfisher, a widespread bird across much of Africa, and one I like because they hover over the water, easy to photograph because you can get your camera focused on them before they fly off. So you've got about a good 10 seconds usually to get the focus just right. So they have the hovering type of display, whereas if you go to the next slide, that is the malachite kingfisher, a bit like our own kingfisher here in the UK and Europe, which simply sits around, waits for something to appear, and then dives down. But this is a tiny, tiny bird, smaller than our own kingfisher. And I love the sort of colours on the head, the different shades of blue. I was really lucky with that one. It was just sitting there and allowing me to photograph it. Next one is the Egyptian plover, which is indeed the emblem of the African Bird Club. It's a wader, a plover, and it is found in places like the Gambia, Senegal, also across Cameroon and Sierra Leone and so on. It is found on rivers, and it's not a coastal bird, it's an inland river bird, but it got known as the crocodile bird, and it is said, but I don't believe it, but it is said that Egyptian plovers used to walk along and a crocodile would see the bird and open its mouth, and the Egyptian plover would just sort of step in gingerly and do a little bit of a hygienist job on the crocodile, removing little bits of meat and fish and so on, getting a meal, but also giving the crocodile a good clean. I don't believe it. I mean, I don't know anybody's ever seen it. I've never seen a photo of it, but it's in some old books, so it's a nice story anyway. Next one is the northern carmine bee eater. So there are two types of carmine bee eater, and you're probably guessing what's the other one. It's bound to be the southern carmine, and indeed it is. This one is the one you see in Senegal and in northern parts of Africa. And I love this shot because I was sitting in a boat, the water was there, the sun was shining on the water and reflecting up straight into the plumage of the bee eater. So it looks like I used flash, but I didn't. It's just actually reflected light. So that was in Senegal. So was the Egyptian plover as well. The next one, well, it's really lucky with this. So hardly anybody's ever seen this bird, the rufous fishing owl, which I photographed in Sierra Leone in West Africa. So I was on a canoe again, in the front seat, I'm pleased to say, and the guide said to me, he'd seen one of these owls, I think the day before, in the trees in some palms, and we're just going through the palms in the water, and there it was. And thankfully, it didn't flush. It just looked at us. I think I probably took this photograph at something incredibly low, like a tenth of a second or maybe a 20th of a second. But I took a lot of photos, and this one was in focus. Fantastic bird. When I first went to Africa, I don't think anybody had ever photographed this bird at all. Again, a vulnerable species. Next one, please, David. So I think this is a really good one too. Now, this was in Rwanda. This is the red-collared babbler, used to be red-collared mountain babbler. And it's a bird I really wanted to see because that's where it's found. And you can't see it really anywhere else. And I was in the Nguya forest in Rwanda. I see Hillary's online today, so she'll be pleased that I put this in. This is a bird that's quite hard to see sometimes. It can be quite high up on the top of mountains. So I had actually scrambled the day before up to see this bird quite badly and nearly injured myself in the effort to get there. Got a view, but not a great view. And then the next day, I'm standing in the reserve next door with lovely stream flowing through with vegetation. And the red-collared babbler came down from the tops of the trees bit by bit and just got nearer to the water at the bottom to have a drink. I spoke to the guide who said to me, a lovely guy called Claver, he said to me, I've worked here 20 years. I've never ever seen that happen before. So I felt really, really lucky to have had an experience like that. And this is, of course, an endangered bird. And I may possibly have one more, can't remember.
I don't think you do actually.
I
Let's.
don't. Okay, so that's a good one to finish on. So it's just a flavor of birds, you know. Some of them forest birds, some of them river birds, some of them open country. Just to give you an idea. But a lot of colour in Africa. That's the other thing. A lot of birds in Africa are very colourful, beautiful songs as well.
Yeah, well, I've had a bit of experience in Africa since, especially since becoming the urban birder 20 years ago, which actually was 20 years ago this year, or 20 years ago now. I'm 20 years old now. But anyway, so yeah, I've had experiences as well. And as you mentioned, our good friend Hilary McBean was on a while ago talking about Rwanda and sound recording. And I was asking her questions, such as, what was the attitude towards conservation in in Rwanda. You've travelled, we're talking about Africa per se. What is the general kind of perception of nature by locals?
Well, I think from my experience, it varies with every location you're in, and surely that's true all over the world, within Europe as well and anywhere. I think it depends what the local community's like. Many communities really value their nature. They live close to nature. Excuse me. Um, but I think one of the problems I have found is that when you talk to people who are keen bird watchers, who are in Africa, they very often don't feel empowered to speak up in their own communities to say, hey, why don't we keep this bit of habitat to protect this bird rather than turning it into agriculture? And when I've said to them, why do you struggle with that? And they say, well, because there's a structure in the village, a tribal structure with a village chief. And as a young birder, maybe a teenager or early 20s, they just wouldn't feel like they would be listened to, and they indeed might be ridiculed and ostracized to some extent. So it's a real shame that they might feel that, but I can totally understand that, if you live in that kind of community, that's what happens. A bit like you and I, when we were young birders, those around us were not particularly forgiving for that, were they? And, and the same must be true in Africa, where actually a lot of the focus is feeding yourself, not necessarily looking after nature. Feeding yourself and your family has to come first. So I think it varies. Thankfully, there's some really good conservation organizations in Africa. I mean, the BirdLife Partnership has 26 organizations employing 500 staff across Africa. They're doing loads of projects, and there are some terrific things. For example, in Nigeria, the Aplori Institute, funded by the Leventis Foundation, with loads of young students doing masters on ornithology and conservation. Just absolutely groundbreaking stuff and leading the world on how to encourage young people to go further in conservation. Plus, we have, universities in South Africa, in Kenya, and in particular, that really encourage conservation.
Yeah, and also, I mean, that's great, but there's also that spectre of overseas corporations exploiting, the landscapes. I mean, I was watching something on YouTube a little while ago about the Democratic Republic of Congo and how, there's lots of people mining there, the cobalt and all that sort of stuff. And it really is worrying when you think there's all that pristine, jungle that's and other landscapes that are now being destroyed for the sake of a quick buck. And often it seems as if some of these countries, I mean, again, this is not, we're not talking about geopolitics on this particular in conservation, with just a general kind of overview. But you kind of feel that sometimes some of these countries, kind of say, you know what, fine, we need the money. Like Madagascar, for example, the fact that that's been mown down. You've been to Madagascar, haven't you?
I have indeed. I mean, what you're saying, David, is true the world over. So, I see it a lot when I travel in South America, rainforests being cut down in Brazil at an incredible rate, faster than Africa. I see it also in Asia as well, where I see plantations being put in of sugar cane and all this sort of stuff, where really, there used to be pristine forest with pittas and things like that. I mean, I'm talking about Thailand, Malaysia. China. I was in China last year. Huge, huge areas of China converted just for agriculture, with trees planted, but not planted as young trees, but mature trees planted with stilts all around them to make sure they don't fall over because they're actually not really rooted into the ground. They're just put there to look good. So, it's depressing. So I wouldn't single out Africa as being unique in that. Africa is just part of the worldwide problem that environments change. I think what I think Africa does have challenges with, though, particularly more than some continents, is climate change. It's already a very hot continent, and as the climate warms up, the people in Africa are probably going to feel it more than most continents around the world. Food is in short supply in some places, and that's going to get worse. So parts of Africa are going to become basically untenable for people to live in, and I think it's a real worry for for them. And it's one of the things that African Bird Club tries to look at. We're particularly looking at species that need help, habitats that need help, and actually also if we can find conservationists or scientists that need help, that's one thing we look for. We've actually now spent £700,000 over the last 30 years. We've supported 350 projects, including Project by Hillary. And we've done that across 50 countries. And it's really, really pleasing to have done that much because this is a charity with no staff, just very, very keen and enthusiastic volunteers. And so I'm really proud to be chair of the African Bird Club once again.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing I want to talk to you about. I mean, going back to the climatic changes. I mean, I've been reading and seeing images, horrific images in Kenya recently of the massive amounts of rain they've been having and floods killing loads of people. Anyway, going back to the African Bird Club, can you tell us a bit about the African Bird Club? How was it formed? Uh, and, apart from what you just said, what else does it do?
So, as I mentioned at the very beginning, there are four World Bird Clubs covering each of the major parts of the world. So, South America, Asia, Middle East, and Africa. So African Bird Club was formed, I think, in 1994. We had a team based in the UK who were all birders who'd been to Africa and absolutely loved it. So there were very few Africans involved back then. It's true to say it was a bunch of British birders, and you know, I think sometimes that can look somewhat colonial, but I can tell you the African Bird Club today, we have more African members than we do from Europe and UK and USA. Um, we started having meetings. We had a bulletin. So the bulletin I have in my hand. Maybe I'll hold it sideways so it doesn't go looking odd. We produce that every 6 months. So about 120 pages per issue, full of news, latest sightings, latest bit of science, bird identification articles, photographs as well. And we also had an annual meeting, and we also started going to the bird fair. So we do pretty much all those things still. We tend not to meet face to face quite as much. I think Zoom has made it so much easier to meet just like this rather than try and get face to face. But we do meet a lot of people at the bird fair. So if you're going to the Global Bird Fair in July, come and find us and say hello and see what we're doing. I think the main thing we also want to try and do, I mean, when I was chairman before, I left leaving my successors with a challenge. I said within 2 years, I'd like there to be as many members in Africa as there are outside of Africa. And now we have achieved that. And what we've done is we've made free membership for people who deserve it in Africa. They are supported members. And as a result of that, we have a lot of them throughout Africa where there is virtually no postal service. So sending them a hard copy bulletin would never work, but they can now look at the bulletin on their phone. So we've got about 1,000 members spread around the world. They say loads in Africa. And people who join, if they're in the UK or Africa and they want hard copy, it's £30. If they are in Europe, it's 33. And as I say, and we also do a digital membership for £25 for those people. And that's including, of course, America. So much easier to provide things digitally. And as I say, the African members, many of them, most of them, get free digital membership. And that's exactly how it should be, engaging with people, getting them interested, and giving them access to information that can help them advance.
Yeah. I mean, it's my naive dream that, for example, in Britain, there is quite a reasonably sized African population from all corners of Africa. And it'd be great if they could be engaged in some way to give something back, given that they're now living in maybe a slightly better situation than it would be back home, just to to get people like them involved.
Well,
Because
you
I
know, it's just an interesting point you're making there, David, because I have lots of black friends from Africa or the West Indies, and you're the only one I know who's a birder, and I talk to them about birding, and they say stuff like, "Well, no, I'm not interested in that. I'll leave you to do that." Um, Almost every African, or let's put it another way, almost every black birder I have met, apart from you, has been in Africa. And there are loads of African birders, and they are wonderful. And once they get the opportunity to do something and they can see that they're not alone and there are others doing it and they can learn and people don't sort of pick on them for that, then, I think sky's the limit. And Hillary has done great work on that.
Yeah, she has. And by the way, guys, if you want to watch any past episodes of In Conservation With, then obviously go to the Urban Birder YouTube channel, and you'll find the conversation I had with Hillary on there as well. Yeah, it's funny because I was on a plane the other day, and next to me was this young guy who actually turned out to be a member of the RAF, and he was well, actually, eventually heading to Cyprus. And when I had a copy of Nightjars of the World on my lap. I must have looked a strange sight, wearing headphones, nodding to music and reading a book on birds. But he said to me, I never really thought about birds before, just never really entered my life. And I think, despite what I've just said a minute ago, that is a universal thing, isn't it? People just don't consider the idea of being sort of thinking about anything to do with natural history because it's up for someone else to do. And plus, I'm not an expert, so therefore, I'll move on and do something else. And it's a shame that we can't get some of those people to just realize that it's not even about learning names or, it's just about them being aware that there is this wonderful thing out there, which is, by their doorstep, not necessarily in the middle of nowhere, that they can support. Even,
Absolutely. If that guy had lived next door to you, I'm sure by now he'd have been a birder, or at least wouldn't be asking you those questions. If you're not exposed to it at any point in your life, then you don't get into it. It's like people who are not exposed to sport because nobody in their family plays sport or watches sport. So they sit next to you on a plane and think, sport, why do you want to do that? What a waste of time. So we all come from a different background. But I think it is great to see people in Africa being either converted to birding or the birder within them is being discovered. And that's what we need to do more of.
yeah, and you're right. I mean, I've been to several countries in Africa, and I've been with some amazing guides. I mean, they know their stuff inside out, and they can hear and see things unbelievably. I remember when I was in Kenya, I had a flotilla of eight, if that's the right word to use, of eight guides around me, and they were just seeing everything, and I was just totally overwhelmed. It's incredible. But there was
Yeah.
one time when, because they called me Lucky Lindo, because for some reason I kept on going places and finding, like for example, there was a plantation where crowned eagles used to nest, and my guides, in plural, said they haven't been here for about 4 years, and I said, "Oh, what's that over there?" And there
Mm.
was a crowned eagle, stuff like that. So I was quite pleased with.
Absolutely. So, I mean, don't underestimate the number of people in Africa who are interested in birds. So, I run a Facebook group called the African Bird Club Community, and we have 28,000 followers on that who get photos every day of African birds and information. 28,000 people. I mean, that's 28 times larger than the African Bird Club has ever been. But it's great. You don't have to sign them all up as members. It's just great to communicate with them, keep them engaged, make them care. That's what I want people to do. I want people to care about birds in Africa so that when a decision comes to them and they have to think about, well, do I save the bird or do I feed my people? They maybe think a little bit longer about saving the bird.
Yeah, well, you're the man to do that, totally. Now, talking about you're the man, let's talk about you. You are on a quest, I guess, to try and see as many of the world's species of birds before before you go, before I go, and all that sort of stuff. Um, and in Africa in particular, you've kind of done fairly good sweep of the number of species in Africa. How many? Firstly, how many species are there in Africa, and how many have you seen?
Okay, so Africa, the figure's a bit vague because you have to decide what is Africa. So if you include Madagascar, if you include the Canary Islands, you include Seychelles, the number goes up and whatever. But roughly speaking, it's about 2,400 or so, maybe a bit more on mainland Africa. There's about another 1,100 or so on the islands, which of course includes Madagascar. And in Madagascar, of course, almost everything there is endemic. So I have seen 1,950 maybe. I haven't quite cracked the 2,000 yet. I think a couple of people have. So I'm in the top sort of 10 for Africa for sure. Um, and worldwide there are 11,140 or thereabout species, and I've seen 8,900 and 63, I think. So I've got, just under 40 to go to get to the magic 9,000. And that was something which was done for the first time ever in 2012 by Tom Gullick, who was a big travel industry man. He set up Clarkson's Holidays in the 1970s. Um, Dead now, sadly. But Tom got there first. And of course, there were fewer birds back then, so he did it rather well. He'd have been on probably well over 9,000 now if he'd have been doing it today. There are about 30 people who've seen 9,000 species, and so I'm just about to join that little group, probably in August, and I'm really looking forward to it. So that's where I'm at.
So, what constitutes finding a species? Because sometimes, I've been on tours in South America and Africa where the guy says, "Oh, hear that? That's a," and then that's all you get of it. Or see that little shadow? It's gone now. That was. Where do you
Well,
draw the line in terms of ticking a species that you've encountered potentially?
I guess everybody's got their own benchmark on this. So I don't tick birds that I only hear. I keep a note that I've heard them, but I wait until I've seen them before I count them. I think quite a lot of people in Sweden still actually tick if they've just heard the bird. So if I did that, I'd have about another 150 on my list. If I get a bad view of something, that quite often comes up. So I've had it a couple of times just recently. If I see something go over, I can see it's a parrot. The leader says that's a whatever parrot, and I get some features on it. Yes, and I'm hearing it. I think, well, okay, yeah, I've seen the bird. I know what it is. If it's just a shape or not even the head of the bird, I've never ticked a bird I haven't seen the head of. So if I see the back end of a bird, doesn't matter how well it's wagging its tail, the back end of a bird is not a tick for me. So yeah, I could have had a few more. I could have been over 9,000 by now if I'd have been a little less hard on myself. But you've got to see something properly, otherwise you're cheating yourself. My view.
And just say, what do you think you'll end up on? Is that how long's a piece of string?
Well, first of all, how long am I going to live? Um, I think regardless of however long I'm going to live, there is a point at which I'm going to run out of steam. So you need four things. You need time, you need dedication, you need good health, and you need money. So all of those things at various times can be in short supply. So you only have to lose one of those things and you sort of run out of road. So let's say I've got another 10 years to go. I'm 65 right now. So say I quit the hard stuff at 75. I would guess by then, just through birding generally, I would probably have picked up another, I don't know, 300 or so, 400 maybe. I'm not going to be on 10,000, but there are a lot of bird species out there that haven't yet been discovered. And there are a lot of bird species that are being seen, but are not yet identified as a species in their own right. Like, for example, some of the pitters in Asia where there was, like the red-bellied pitter that went from being one species to about 12 or 13. The island thrush, exactly the same, I think. So there's a lot of work with DNA. So anyway, what I'm really saying is, let's say by the time I'm 75, the world list is probably going to be, oh, way over 12,000, maybe nearer to 15,000 if the, people get really going with DNA analysis. I will get loads of new birds just sitting in my armchair because they'll tell me that the bird I saw 30 years ago was actually now a new species. So I just go, oh yeah, good, tick. Um, so I don't know. I think it's important to actually know when to stop. I know that when I do pass away, I want to be able to leave a decent amount of cash to conservation organizations that carry on looking after the things I've cared about so much and enjoyed so much. So I don't want to use up all the money on birding trips. And plus, I also want to live reasonably comfortably in my very old age.
What is it like? I mean, I'm not. I mean, look, I'm in my in my kind of home here in Extremadura in Spain. I'm crazy. I want to try and get as much as I can because I always want to be in the top 10 of the eBirds 100 list of birders. But outside of that and anywhere else in the world, I don't really care. I don't count myself as a lister. If I go somewhere, people often say, "Oh, what do you want to see?" I don't want to see anything. I just want to see what I see. But for you, do you have like a hit list? And B, when you see something new, what emotion do you have?
Okay, so I always will have some sort of a hit list wherever I go. And I've always had that. I've always known what I particularly want to see, and I obviously particularly want to see things I haven't seen before. I can assure you, I never lose enjoyment out of seeing birds I've seen 100 times. It doesn't bother me. I think somebody said to me recently, "Oh, wow, you're sort of in the top 30 in the world of all time." And I said, "Well, yeah." And they'd say, "What does that feel like?" And I said, "Well, it doesn't really feel like anything. I mean, if you're number 30, then there's always people ahead of you. Why am I not number 29 or number 28? I can't get wound up about that. There are people ahead of me in the list who are a lot older than me and are going to die, and they won't see more new birds. So I will probably, well, I will overtake them. Um, I think the other thing I'd say is this, we all remember, here's the question, who was the first man to step on the moon, David? Neil Armstrong,
Yeah,
right?
it's fine. Yeah, Neil Armstrong. Yeah.
Absolutely. Who was the second guy to stand on the moon? And who was the third guy? Nobody remembers. So the only person that they remember is right now Peter Casner, who is the world number one birder with over 10,000 species. Everybody else, none of the other people matter. It doesn't matter whether you're fifth, sixth, seventh. Nobody knows who you are. So I think it's not something to get too excited about. I think it's good to have a good view of the bird. How do I feel when I see the bird? Well, there are some birds I've seen that are brand new for me, and they are literally little brown jobs that I couldn't have identified without help. That's a bit not a great moment. It's nice to have the tick, and I'm always pleased, particularly if I can get a photo. But there are other birds where I just think, wow. So, for example, about 8, 9 years ago, I saw king penguin for the first time. Seeing king penguin in zoo, of course, but I went from seeing none to seeing 300,000 in one go. And that was the biggest wow moment I've ever had. I have to say that red-collared babbler was a wow moment when it came down for the second time. But I sort of forgot about the first time I saw it after that because it was so nice and close.
But do you ever go? You live in the UK. Are you bored in the UK? You kind of thinking, "Oh God, I can't wait to get out of here and carry on my quest."
No, because I set myself a challenge wherever I go. So a couple of days ago, I was walking in some forest not far from here, looking for goshawks, looking for woodlark. Excuse me. Um, didn't see either, but it was a great walk. I think I did 10,000 steps. I knew I'd done 10,000 steps when I finished, feet hurt, and I just felt great. So, I think it's important never to lose touch with what you're doing locally because when you get old, these are the birds you're going to be looking at. So I am sure that when I am 90 or whatever, if I'm lucky to be that old, living in a home, I will just enjoy watching the garden birds. You just switch yourself to what's available wherever you are.
You must have a lot of stories. Let's focus on Africa. You must have a lot of stories in terms of your search or searches for particular species. Um, let's talk about health. Have you ever had any issues when you've, not been well day to
Sure, I
day?
picked 2009 was a bad year for me. I picked up a tropical illness called leishmaniasis, which is passed on by sandflies that bite you. Gave me an illness which bit by bit shuts down many of the major organs. It's a protozoa in the bloodstream. So I had to have 21 days of chemotherapy in the London School for Tropical Medicine. Uh,
Were you
I
sent home? What did you? How does it work? What are the symptoms? Do you get sick straight away, or was it something you realise when you get back?
No, I just had a bite on my neck that never healed, and seemed to get bigger rather than smaller, and bled quite a bit. So I thought that's not right. So I took a photograph of it, sent it to the hospital, and they said, yeah, it looks like leishmaniasis. I'd actually spoken to my doctor about it before, and he insisted it was an infected hair follicle, but he was wrong. Good job I decided to think outside the box. That same year, I was in a bus in Colombia, coming down a mountain. The brakes failed on the bus, so we're coming down the mountain with no brakes. Thankfully, the bus driver managed to crash the bus against the curb, and I was able to get out. I was in Colombia, I was in Mexico. We got surrounded by bandits with masks on. Not great. I think we'd walked into a training camp for terrorists. So thankfully, I think they thought we were CIA, and in the end, they realized we're just a bunch of old people watching birds. So they let us go. And we've all got stories like that. I've probably never really been that close to being killed, but it's felt like it a couple of times. You just learn to be a bit careful.
And who do you travel with? Do you do a lot of these trips on your own or with a partner, or do you actually hang out in bird groups? Like go on a proper organised bird tour with
So
10 people.
yeah, so over the years, I've done a lot of organized tours with the major companies that we all know. I'm less inclined to do that now because wherever I go, generally speaking, 95% of the birds that are going to be seen are birds I've seen before. And obviously, I'm interested in the 5% I haven't seen. And it's unfair on everyone if you start trying to take over the trip. So if I can, I'll do a private trip with friends, like for example, Janice, who's on the call now. I've got a couple of friends I'm going to Australia with in July, and we're going for 4 weeks. You know, um, that's the best way if you've got quite a restricted list. But it's changed over the years, and of course, doing it privately can cost you more, or if you get a few friends together, it can cost you about the same. And then, of course, you have a bit more control over what happens each day.
And how long have you been doing this?
My first birding trip, as I mentioned, to Kenya was when I was 23, so it's 1983. Started going on paid for bird tours in when I was 33. So yeah, I must have done about 120 of those trips. It's quite shocking actually when you think how much money you spend on this in a lifetime. It's a big number, it'll be six figures and probably nearer to a seven than a six figure by the time I've done it in 10 years' time. Um, yeah, so I've been at it a long time. And I thankfully worked in travel industry, so I was being sent to places like Australia, and I just extend my tour to carry on for a few extra days after the business trip. I was probably supposed to have a meeting on a Wednesday, fly home Wednesday night or maybe Thursday morning, and I would actually go birding on the Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I then fly home Sunday night, which means you go overnight and you arrive in London 4 o'clock in the morning, have a shower, have a change of clothes at the office, go through your in tray before anybody comes in, and nobody even realizes you've done that.
Wow. Have you ever considered leading tours? I mean, you've obviously amassed a lot of knowledge. I mean, because I know you, and I know that you're very astute and very kind of you ask questions and you learn about stuff. Because I know that there's some people out there, it's all about just ticking off a bird and not even knowing what it is really, or where it fits into the grand scheme of things. So has that ever crossed your mind?
So I lead in the UK for Nature Trek, and I lead their day tours in Hampshire, where I'm doing all my birding in the UK. I have been asked by a number of companies if I will lead for them overseas. I think yeah, I'm not against doing that, but it's usually taking me away from something I'd rather be doing. I mean, if I'm going to go to a foreign country and see loads of new birds for me, that's great because that's giving me something as well as, everybody else. But if all I'm doing is looking at birds I've seen many times before, unless it's just with friends, it feels like a little bit like time wasted. Plus, I have to say, if I've not seen the birds before, I would feel like a bit of a fraud because I wouldn't want to go on a tour with somebody who was going to the place for the first time. So it's probably not going to happen very much. But certainly, I'm always happy to go with friends and do that at least once a year.
It also seems pretty arduous. I mean, you must be sort of, scrambling through jungles for miles upon mile, mile upon mile, being chewed on by leeches and the potential of being, attacked by a, I don't know, whatever. Is that how it is, or is it more a case of, the guide knows somewhere and it's like a shortcut? We go, around here. It's only, maybe a mile or whatever. Is it like that, or is it more like the sort of exploration, going through thick jungles and camping out in the middle of the
It
sea?
depends. So yeah, you get your moment with like the shoebill where you have to go waist deep in papyrus swamp, which I'd never thought about doing. Mostly you're going to somewhere where the guide knows the bird is has been recently, and thankfully, eBird and other online digital resources allow you to get that data before you go. So yeah, you don't tend to waste too much time. You don't have to go through thick vegetation. Generally, that doesn't happen. I mean, there are a few places I've been where there's a particular bird we want to see. It's calling. We've got to get to it if we want to have a chance of seeing it. And it involves a little bit of scrambling around. I mean, one of the most difficult birds I've ever seen is a bird called the madanga. So the madanga is a form of pipit which lives in trees. It's only been seen, I think, 5 times ever. Um, First time in 1922 when it was shot by a collector. Seen again, I think, in the 1990s, early 2000s. I saw it in 2016. We were the fourth group to see it. It involved a real big trudge up a mountain, and we had to go, there were no paths. We had to go off all over the place, climbing under trees, over trees. Yeah, so if you want to see something really hard, you're probably not going to have a path, and probably you're not going to have any information because no one's seen it before. By the way, it was seen in 2017 by another group, and it was never seen again. So I'm going to guess that bird is still there. It's just in a difficult part to get to, and it might be another 25 years before it's seen.
Wow. And during these treks and during these journeys and trips and what have you come across surprises in terms of, well, by that I'm talking about coming across an area and thinking, oh, I didn't realize there's so many of these here. Maybe they weren't, recorded or realized to be in that particular place. In other words, distributions
Yeah, sure.
might not
Well, that
be
you
different to what
know,
you expected.
for years ago, I was birding in Iran, and we found the first record of something. I think it actually had been there loads of times, just nobody'd been in that particular part of Iran. That day when I saw the Madanga, as we were starting our trek up the mountain, we flushed a buru thrush. This is on the island of Buru in Indonesia. We flushed it off the nest, and nobody had ever seen the nest before. In fact, only a handful of people had seen buru thrush properly. So somebody said, "Well, I bet no one's ever photographed it on the nest." Well, no, if they've never found the nest, they won't have done. So we're trying to think about how on earth we're going to photograph it on the nest. Well, I said it's not going to sit there with you standing here. So I took my belt off. I tied my camera to a tree. I use a bridge camera for all those photos. Tied the bridge camera to the tree. I put it on video mode, focused it on the nest, and then left it. Had an hour of battery time left, and got lovely video of burrow thrush on the nest, the first ever photograph of
Wow,
that species on the nest, which got published in a scientific journal. So yeah, that was sort of I never knew I was going to do that. So yeah, that's always a nice thing, something unexpected.
that's amazing. That's absolutely, it's quite inspirational actually. It kind of makes me feel like going out there and trying to do it myself.
Definitely, definitely. Well, I hope to get back to Africa before too long. I've been, as you know, I've been to 34 countries. Most of the ones I haven't been to are a bit unsafe. I'm thinking about going to South Africa maybe next year. I'd love to go back to Rwanda. I really enjoyed that, and love to go back to Uganda as well. Uh, I'm mainly going to be revisiting places in Kenya and things like that over the next few years in Africa, because there are still a few birds I haven't seen, and even if I have seen them before, they're great to see for a second or third time.
Yeah. I guess the big sort of obvious question in a way is there, what is the bird in Africa that you haven't seen that you obviously would like to see?
Well, yes, there is one, and it's the green-breasted pitter. So I went to Uganda in 2004. Green-breasted pitta is regularly seen, in fact, regularly seen by non-birders who go on chimp treks and things like that. So anyway, I missed it. It was seen the day before, it was seen the day after, but the day I was there, just nobody could find it. So I went back a couple of years ago, went with a very good friend who's a guide out there, and we'd heard that for some reason they'd gone quiet. They normally call a lot around July, August, but they hadn't called since June. So that wasn't a good sign. And we didn't see it. So I've got to go to Uganda for a third time. And I don't want to go to my grave not having seen green-breasted pitta. It's just a super looking bird.
Is that, I mean, apart from the fact it's super looking, is that the only reason why you want to see it?
Well, I want to see it because it's cheated me twice and outsmarted me. I mean, here's the thing. Green-breasted pitta has seen me, but I haven't seen it.
That's fair enough. Okay, well, just want to again say that you have been watching In Conservation with, and if you are watching this in the future, please, or you're watching it on YouTube, please like and subscribe and leave a comment. I'm sorry I haven't got all the dangly, jingly bits here, but you just have to go old school and do that. I want to thank my good friend Keith Betton for sparing his time to come and talk to us today. There will be details about the African Bird Club in the comment section as well, so you can look them up and hopefully help with their work in conservation. So yeah, Keith, I just want to thank you, and I hope that we get to meet again soon because we speak a lot on the phone, but we just keep on missing each other in the world, apart from when we occasionally bump into each other at bird fair.
Absolutely. Well, it's been great chatting with you, David. I'm glad to have had people listening in. Do have a look at the African Bird Club. AfricanBirdClub.org is what you'll find on the internet. Hope you'll join us, maybe join the Facebook group that I run. And David, thank you for all you do for communicating with birders because there are millions of birders out there and we need to have millions more. And you're doing a great job in engaging people, not just in birding, but in conservation too.
That's very kind of you. Thank you.